Hello and welcome, dear viewers and listeners, to our Wednesday, April 6, 2022 program. This is Shimelis Gebremichael with UMD News Package for today. We invite you all to stay with the program, and for your feedbacks, please use our email address newstips2020umd@gmail.com. UMD extensively works in understanding, measuring, and doing matters. Also, our news team attempts to update you with the latest in Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa, and Africa in general and the world. Any of your support, including the provision of news tips, comments, questions, and suggestions, are always welcomed. Before we jump into our news packet today, here are the headlines for the major news we incorporate. Fighting reported in Moyale environs of the Oromia regional state. South Sudan facing worst humanitarian crisis since independence. A new amnesty report depicts crimes against humanity in Western Tigray. How and in what sense? We will briefly look into this 240-page report issued yesterday by Amnesty International. We'll look into this story later in this edition. Now we will move into providing more information on this and other news items. As we always say, please do not forget to like and share our programs and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And in the first part of our news package, we will look into news in brief. And the first one is what has happened over the weekends. And residents in Ottawa are feeling the humanitarian crisis in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. I don't know if they are alive or dead. This is one of the comments made by one of the voices heard among the participants in Ottawa who rallied to advocate humanitarian crisis in Tigray over this last weekend. Azeb Gebremichael, an Ottawa resident who has a family in Tigray, told CTV, a media outlet in Canada, over the weekend. One of the comments she gave was, "They left us a message saying, 'Please help us. We are starving.'" Imagine how painful it is to hear that and not being able to call them. We'll briefly show you the video of what has happened in Ottawa over the weekend. And next up is fighting reported in Moyale environs of the Oromia regional state. Days after officials, though, renewed offensives on armed groups in Oromia, fighting was reported in Ethiopia's Moyale environs. Local media reports indicate that there has been fierce fighting between the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and members of the armed group Oromo Liberation Army (OLA), often referred to by the government as OLF Shani. According to BBC News, clashes occurred between Saturday evening and Sunday morning in Moyale, close to the border with Kenya. Southern Oromia is where the armed group is actively engaged in militarized clashes with federal Oromia regional state security forces, including the special forces and the local police. Oda Terbi, OLA's international spokesperson, tweeted over the weekend that In the southern zone earlier this week, the regime's forces made a full withdrawal back to Nagele Borana after losing several commanders and sustaining heavy casualties in the battle in Melka Lami. According to Addis Standard report, also, the renewed pledge from federal and regional officials to eliminate the rebel groups intensified in the last 2 weeks after members of the Oromia State Council, otherwise called Chafe Oromia, confronted the region's President Shimelis on why the regional security apparatus has repeatedly failed to contain what they call them rebels. The Tigray government condemns the deliberate removal of victims of genocide. The government of Tigray condemns the deliberate removal, evidence tampering, and destruction and the discretion of the remains of victims of genocide. According to the statement issued by Tigray External Affairs Office, the discretion of the victims of the Tigray genocide is broadcasted by the Ethiopian media outlets and led by the Amhara authorities. The office of the Amhara forces, alongside the Eritrean and Ethiopian governments, have unleashed unimaginable horrors on Tigrayans. The statement, after chronicling all the atrocities that happened to the Tigrayans, called upon the international community to say never again to these acts and hold perpetrators who committed massive human rights violations and abuses. It is time for the international community to go beyond the platitudinous expansions and take concrete actions to ensure accountability and justice for Tigrayans. UAE provides 30 tons of food aid to Ethiopia's Tigray region as what is labeled as part of its direct relief airlift to meet the needs of the population. The UAE has sent a plane carrying 30 tons of food to Ma'ala. The shipment will help more than 7,000 people, including 5,600 women and children in Tigray. The UAE's humanitarian aid to date for the region has included 13 relief, medical, and food aid planes carrying 220 tons. Mohammed Al Rashidi, the UAE's ambassador to Ethiopia, said that the aid comes within framework of the UAE's efforts to provide all support to countries in need, especially to support women and children to assist them in overcoming dire conditions. South Sudan is facing worst humanitarian crisis since independence. A senior UN official warns South Sudan is facing its worst humanitarian crisis since the country became independent in July 2011. UN humanitarian coordinator of South Sudan, Sarah Beslow Nayanti, said the number of people struggling to eke out a living keeps rising year after year. She said year after year, more people are plunged into extreme poverty and desperation. She said the situation cannot go on. Something must change. She said, as much as we need $1.7 billion this for humanitarian needs, we also need funding for development and for peace building, ensuring social cohesion and resilience. Humanitarian coordinator Neantil said, investing in development in South Sudan and shoring up people's ability to become self-sufficient will loosen the country's dependency on international aid. We now move into one story we have chosen to present to you in more detail for today.
Here.
They took all my cutlass, burned my sorghum in the house, and told us this is not our region. They said our land is east of the Tekeze River.
A new Amnesty report depicts crimes against humanity in western Tigray. A new Amnesty International report indicated that Amhara regional security forces and civilian authorities in Ethiopia's western Tigray zone have committed widespread abuses against the Tigrayans since November 2020. In its 240-page report issued yesterday, April 5, 2022, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch said Ethiopian authorities have severely restricted access and independent scrutiny of the region, keeping the campaign of ethnic cleansing largely hidden. The report, entitled "We Will Erase You from This Land: Crimes Against Humanity and Ethnic Cleansing in Ethiopia's Western Tigray Zone," documents how newly appointed officials in Western Tigray and security forces from neighboring Amhara region systematically expelled several hundred thousand Tigrayan civilians from their homes using threats, unlawful killings, sexual violence, mass arbitrary detention, pillage, forcible transfer, and the denial of humanitarian assistance. These widespread and systematic attacks against the Tigrayan civilian population amount to crimes against humanity as well as war crimes. Kenneth Roth, executive director of Human Rights Watch, said since November 2020, Amhara officials and security forces have engaged in a relentless campaign of ethnic cleansing to force Tigrayans in western Tigray from their homes. Ethiopian authorities have steadfastly denied the shocking breadth of the crimes that have unfolded and have ingraciously failed to address them. The report further noted that the Ethiopian government should ensure immediate and sustained access to the region for humanitarian agencies, release all the arbitrarily detained and investigate and appropriately prosecute those responsible for abuses. The report added any consensual agreement reached by the parties to armed conflict should include the deployment of the AU-led international peacekeeping force to the Western Tigray zone to ensure the protection of all communities from abuses. Over 15 months, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch researchers interviewed more than 400 people, including in-person interviews of Tigrayan refugees in Sudan who suffered or witnessed abuses. Researchers also consulted medical and forensic report, court documents, satellite imagery, and photographic and video evidence that corroborated accounts of grave abuses. According to the report, former detainees held in sites across Tigray said many people died in detention sites run by the Amhara forces and Fano militias. Some died because of torture, denial of medical care, and lack of food and water. Guards killed others. Both Ethiopian federal forces and Amhara authorities have denied allegations of ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray. On February 25, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch wrote to the Ethiopian federal and Amhara and regional authorities concerning the organization's findings. At time of writing, only the Amhara regional government had responded. Amnesty also called upon the Ethiopian government and its international regional partners to take concrete steps to protect all communities in Western Tigray. On March 24, the government announced a humanitarian truce. Regardless of any truce or ceasefire, Ethiopia's federal and regional authorities should allow unhindered, independent, and sustained humanitarian assistance. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch said the government should also demobilize and disarm all abusive militia forces in West Tigray and vet Amhara special forces and Ethiopian federal forces and remove those implicated in serious abuses. Civilian officials, including interim authorities in Western Tigray and security forces personnel implicated in serious abuses, should be suspended pending investigation. We will leave the rest of the report for you to read and get more information.
To speak Tigrinya freely, my mother tongue. I am a beekeeper, and all I want to do is work.
Well, with that, we will come to the end of the news for today. This has been Shimelis Gebremichael here at UMD Media. Please do not forget to like and share our program and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, follow our programs in other platforms to become the first to know what's going on in Ethiopia, the Horn, and Africa in general. You can easily reach us via our email address, newstips2020umd@gmail.com. Thank you for watching and have a good one.
Ethiopia, where a war has been underway for more than a year. Blockades preventing food and aid from reaching millions as the world in assistance.
Genocide.
The people of Tigray have been denied food, medicine.
Dozens of protesters took to the streets in Ottawa's Byward Market on Saturday to show support.
We are trying to raise money to send 40 medical kits to Tigray. We've raised 20,000. We are planning to raise 20,000 more.
Trying to put pressure on the Canadian government to act and save people from dying.
It's one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, but unfortunately, it's a crisis that much of the world doesn't even know about.
For Azib, the worry never ends.
Imagine the guilt and the shame that you feel being unable to help your family.
She believes her nephew was able to get through to her in the voicemail because of help from the International Red Cross. Now she waits and hopes to hear from him again.
Organizers say that they are looking for support from the Canadian government and for help with fundraising for the medical kits. The efforts are being put together by United Tagaru Canada. Colton.
An incredibly difficult situation for those families. CTV's Natalie Van Wyk reporting first live tonight. Thanks, Natalie.